Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Inside Turkey event. Today, we will be talking about the recent developments regarding the Israeli-Palestinian impasse. We have three distinguished speakers. Before we start our panel, let me introduce you our speakers. Today, we will first listen to Berdal Aral. Professor Berdal Aral completed his PhD on Turkey and international society from a critical legal perspective in 1994 at the University of Glasgow. His main areas of interest, both in his scholarship and teaching, include international law and human rights. He has written 4 books in Turkish, namely The Right of Self-Defense Under International Law, Collective Rights as Third-Generation Human Rights, From Global Security to Global Hegemony, the UN System and the Muslim World, and lastly, Perpetual Betrayal, the Palestinian Problem and International Law Under Imperialism's Shadow. Professor Aral has also published numerous articles both in English and Turkish on the topics mentioned above, as well as on international organizations, the search for integration in the Muslim world, and Turkish foreign policy. Professor Aral currently teaches at the Department of International Relations at Istanbul Medeniyet University. Second, we will listen to Professor Dr. Yücel Acer, who is currently a professor of international law and head of the Department of Public Law at Faculty of Law, Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University. He received his undergraduate degree in international relations from Ankara University, Faculty of Political Sciences, and he received his master's in international law from Sheffield University, and he finished his doctoral degree in international law at the University of Bristol in the UK. His areas of expertise are international maritime law, international law of armed conflicts, and international human rights law. He published many academic articles in qualified academic journals. He is also the author of the books entitled The Asian Maritime Disputes and International Law, The Crime of Aggression in International Law, Asylum Strategy of Turkey from the Global and Regional Perspectives, and he is the co-author of Basic Textbook of International Law. Lastly, we will listen to Dr. Khalid el-Awaisi, who graduated from the pioneering field of Islamic Jerusalem Studies. He received his PhD from the University of Aberdeen and his MSc also from the University of Abertay. His main expertise is in the historical geography of Beit al-Maqdis and geographical interpretations of the Quran. He published a groundbreaking monograph called Mapping Islamic Jerusalem and a discovery of geographical boundaries, in which he was able to uncover the geographical extents around Islamic Jerusalem and other religious spiritual entities. He taught at many Turkish and British universities and was appointed as the director of the research center, Islamic Jerusalem Research Center. He has also supervised and studied a number of PhD and postgraduate students in the fields of early Islam, Islamic Jerusalem studies, and contemporary thought in modern Middle East in England and Turkey. He still works as an assistant professor in the Department of Islamic History at Ankara Social Sciences University and he teaches master's programs on Beit al-Maqdis and Quds studies. And please let me tell you about our format today. Today we will have 4 rounds of questions. In each round, I will ask a question to one of our speakers. Then I will move on to our next speaker and ask his question. And at the end of the rounds of questions, we will have a general Q&A section in which we will receive questions from our viewers, and these will be directed to our speakers. So please join me in welcoming Professor Berdal Aral. Berdal Hocam, welcome, and thanks for accepting our invite. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Professor Aral, we have been paying extra attention to this issue, but personally, I've been struggling with naming the issue itself. So in my opinion, there's a great problem in terms of pinpointing what the real problem is and how it is represented to be. So I'd like to ask you, a question regarding the gist of the problem. In your opinion, what is the gist of the problem that has befallen on Palestinians? In other ways, how should we approach the issue and how should we name it?
Okay, thank you. The common perception in the international media about the Palestinian problem and the Palestinian struggle for self-determination is generally portrayed as Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This, I think, appellation is a problem that distorts the truth about the Palestinian issue. Palestinian problem is actually a problem of settler colonialism by Zionists occupying and colonizing the land of Palestine gradually, and replacing and uprooting the indigenous population, which had been living there for hundreds of years, and replacing them with Jews from outside who have no connection, who have had no connection with the land. So this is a case of colonial settler aggression against the indigenous people. The matter is not simply confined to occupied territory in 1967. Actually, the whole issue is about the whole of mandatory Palestine. So therefore, to portray the problem simply as a conflict between two actors, Palestinians and Israelis, is actually a misnomer. Likewise, to portray the problem as a human rights violation, simply as a human rights violation against the Palestinians, is also, I think, a distortion. Of course, there is human rights violation, no doubt about that. But this is more than that. Or seeing the matter simply as a minority problem is also something that, in a way, distorts the truth, because the Palestinians are only minority in Israel. I mean, because they have, some Palestinians have an Israeli nationality, but the great majority of Palestinians are actually not Israeli citizens, and they are either under military occupation or they are refugees in different parts of the world. Therefore, the problem to be portrayed in the right context. The problem is something that concerns the liberation of not only the 67 territories, but it also concerns the liberation of Palestine itself. In this sense, Palestinian problem is really a very, very crucial problem, and it's a great problem. It's a historical problem. The problem did not begin in 1967. The problem began immediately after the demise of the Ottoman Empire, its disintegration, and the replacement of Ottomans in the area by colonial states, which are the British Empire and the French empires, French state. So they actually gradually dominated the area, establishing mandate systems. In the case of Palestine, it was the British that established the state of the mandatory system in Palestine, and gradually the Jews were brought in under the purview of the British colonial system, colonial regime. So it's not so the whole issue. It's about colonialism. It's about imperialism. It's about also military occupation of Palestine. It's also about, of course, systematic racism against the Palestinians. It's only part of the story. So we could say that Palestinian problem did not start in 1967. It's a problem that emerged for about 100 years before, and gradually the problem was established as a result of the immigration of Jews under the British management into Palestine, and being privileged to have their residence and nationality and all sorts of economic activities and cooperation with the British administration. So therefore, the issue has to be looked at from a historical perspective without dealing with the historical context, the history of Jewish immigration as part of colonization, the history of the mandatory system, and United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1947, which partitioned the area unjustly and against, I think, many norms of international law into two distinct areas between Jews and Arabs, and giving the largest part to the Jews itself is something that has to be, I think, looked at So the whole issue is very complex. It's very deep-rooted. You cannot differentiate the issue from the case of colonialism. And the awful thing about it is that at a precise time when colonialism was being thrown into dustbin of history, the Palestinian problem began to show itself, became a problem of colonialism. We don't have any colonized territory today, except for the Palestinian territory. It's a colonized territory. Therefore, Israel is an anachronistic state because it has engaged in colonialism at a time when colonialism was becoming something illegal under international law. So all these distortions, all these aberrations and historical, perversions have to be understood in order to make sense of the problem and to find a viable solution to the problem. 5 minutes, is that all right? Do I have time?
I would like to pass to our next question. Thank you very much for this elaboration. I think it suffices to explain the historical context and the conceptual, context in which we can better understand this century-old prolonged problem. I will come back to this point later, but now I would like to pass on to our next speaker, Professor Yücel Acer. Now that Professor Aral has explained the ambits of the problem, I would like to ask you a question regarding the international law perspective, because recently the International Criminal Court has opened an investigation to examine the crimes committed in the occupied Palestinian territory upon the request of the Palestinian Authority. So could you please enlighten us on the background of this indictment? What does it mean and how it has unfolded?
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, before starting to answer your question, I think Berdal Hoca described the question of Palestine and its important aspects. And I have to say that I think it used to be okay to call this dispute as a question of Palestine until only 1947. Until 1947, it was about the future status of the former Ottoman Palestinian territories. But after 1947, when the British mandate ended, it became a question of Israel rather than a question of Palestine, because after that day, it has been all about the status of Israel as a state, and then about its conduct in the Palestinian territories. Now, it's okay, I think, to say that it's all about, how Israel is expelling the Palestinians from the Palestinian territories. So that's why I sometimes call it as a question of Israel rather than a question of Palestine. But unfortunately, until now, all these Israeli acts in the Palestinian territories went on trial or unpunished. So there was only one example that a part of this question was brought to the International Court of Justice. It was about the constructing wall by Israel in the Palestinian territories. And the court decided that, this wall, the constructing such a wall, was against international law in many respects, especially in terms of violating the fundamental rights of Palestinian people. But I think in the whole history, it's the first time that all the crimes which are now committed in the territory of Palestine is before an international criminal court. As you asked how this happened, actually, is a quite significant question. In 2014, when the Palestine was not a party to the International Criminal Court, the state of Palestine made a declaration accepting the jurisdiction of International Criminal Court in the occupied territories of Palestine. So it was the first time that, Palestine made an official declaration accepting the criminal jurisdiction of the court in the territory of Palestine. So it all started in this manner. But later on, the Palestinian state became a party to the International Criminal Court in 2015. So, starting from 2014, the prosecutor of the court started a preliminary examination, criminal examination over the acts of Israel in the territory of Palestine because of this declaration. And later on, since Palestine became a party to the International Criminal Court, prosecutor just continued on this criminal investigation. But in this stage, the prosecutor had to request an authorization from the pretrial chamber about the jurisdiction of court to continue the international criminal investigation. So that's why prosecutor applied to the pretrial chamber for an authorization to continue on the criminal investigation. Actually, the prosecutor applied to the court for two reasons. The first one is that the prosecutor had to request an authorization from pretrial chamber because, according to the statute of International Criminal Court, if one state, if a non-party state applies to the court to investigate acts in certain places, then the prosecutor should request an authorization from a pretrial chamber. That was the first reason. The second reason was that, as the prosecutor explained, the prosecutor, she was all aware of the political disputes around the territories of Palestine. So that's why she wanted to be quite sure about the territorial limits of its jurisdiction, the court's jurisdiction, by requesting a clarification from the pretrial chamber. It all started in this manner. Now, at this stage, there are two decisions. The prosecutor decided to continue criminal investigation because it got an authorization from the pretrial chamber. So that means the pretrial chamber allowed the prosecutor to continue on criminal prosecution investigation in the territories of Palestine. I think it could be a short answer to your question.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Yücel. Now, I'd like to turn back to more recent developments with Dr. Khalid. Yes, he's now back with us. Dr. Khalid, recently the discussion regarding the Palestinian problem has concentrated on al-Quds. I mean, after the unilateral steps taken by Israel and the Trump's effort to accept al-Quds as the capital of Israel, there's been a lot of reaction from the Muslim world and pro-Palestinian groups. And with the Biden government trying to open up a consulate in al-Quds, now the discussion has gained a new momentum. Before getting deeper into this topic, I'd like to ask you a very simple question, which will be helpful in understanding the whole context. So what is the significance of al-Quds within the context of Palestinian resistance against the Israeli occupation and oppression, and what's your take on this issue?
Thank you very much for this question. I'd like to start where Dr. Berdal also started, that this is not a new matter. This is a matter that goes back in time to the British occupation of this land, or what they like to call the mandate, but it was actually an occupation of the land. Al-Quds, Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, had a very important role in the resistance against the British initially, and then it continued into later times during the Zionist occupation. Actually, Al-Quds in general and Al-Aqsa Mosque in particular, one of the first intifadas that took place against the British and Zionist movement at the time was the Buraq revolt in the 1920s. And Al-Aqsa seems to have carried a very important connection in connecting people with the idea of the resistance. Al-Quds itself, the city of Jerusalem, has always been present in the mind of the Palestinians, whether they are secular or whether they are religious. The religious dimension is extremely important in that sense. It had become the core or the nucleus of the resistance, and actually a symbol for the resistance against the Zionists. For this reason, and with all the baggage that this comes with, it's important to see that this is a symbol of the resistance against this settler colonial state. And it has been in the past. It is at the moment. We saw that in recent times where you were asking, especially after Donald Trump announced that it will be the eternal capital of the Jewish people and the eternal capital of Israel. And the response of the Muslim response was rather weak in this regard. But we saw what the Jerusalemites did on the 28th of Ramadan by stopping the Zionists from entering al-Aqsa when it was during the holiest month of Ramadan. The people's response to the Zionists and their plans towards al-Aqsa, which we might delve into later on. However, the importance of this as a symbol for the resistance, not just as a symbol for the resistance, but also it has become the center, particularly after the deal of the century, suggests even taking the Palestinian, Arab and Muslim mind to a very low level, suggesting in the text of the deal of the century that one of the villages beyond the wall, the separation wall or the apartheid wall, beyond it can be called Al-Quds, or anywhere the Palestinians wish to call Al-Quds. Ramallah, you can call it Al-Quds. This is how low the politics has actually got to within this deal of the century, or so-called deal of the century. It is thus what has happened is they helped refocus the issue around Jerusalem, around Al-Quds, and in the last month of Ramadan, what the Israelis tried to do in Al-Aqsa and in the city exploded across not just the city amongst Jerusalemites, amongst the Maqadisa, but it went even beyond. It went across to Gaza, and Gaza got involved in trying to defend Al-Aqsa and Al-Quds by throwing rockets at the Zionists, the Zionist state. The West Bank got involved, and Mahmoud Abbas and his men tried to tame this new uprising. People within the state of Israel, within the 1948, the Palestinians also rose up, and what we saw happen in a mixed city, or what they call the mixed city, like Al-Lud, and across the whole of the inside of Palestine, what is known as the State of Israel. What we saw happen there, actually, in the last month of Ramadan, it showed how important and central this issue of Al-Quds is, not just to Palestinians, not just to Arabs, but to the Muslims across the world.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid. Now, I'd like to get back to Professor Berdal. Professor Berdal, Dr. Khalid has explained the importance of al-Quds within the context of Palestinian resistance, and we have heard from him that the recent atrocities and crimes committed by Israel and the Israeli authorities against Palestinian people and the holy sites that are situated within al-Quds seem to be relating to one side, but it actually relates to all Muslims around the world. So following on that comment, I would like to ask you a question regarding the two-state solution, because by default, when we are talking about the problem, it seems like that we can find a solution between two parties. And within the international context, this solution called the two-state solution has been invariably imposed on diplomatic efforts. So I'd like to learn when this solution started and who wants this solution, and is it still a viable solution?
This is the solution suggested by the two-state approach to the problem. I think is something that is a distortion of the real solution. I mean, those who speak about solving the Palestinian problem by establishing two states, they are not meant to encourage the establishment of a Palestinian state which is viable, permanent, and with full sovereignty. Those that mostly the dominant actors within international society that speak about the two-state solution are actually trying to justify the fait accompli established by the Israeli aggression into Palestinian territories. I mean, those people who speak about the two-state solution are not really concerned about justice. They are not concerned about the deep-rooted facets of the problem. They are not concerned about the colonial dimension of the problem. They are not concerned about the crimes of Israel. They are only concerned about somewhat establishing an unsustainable, fragile states in fragmented territories in the West Bank, in which most of the settlements, illegal settlements, Jewish settlements will remain. Many roadblocks, the roads will remain. Many security areas will remain. And therefore, this state, the so-called state, will be simply a puppet in the hands of the Israelis. So they are not really genuine. I don't mean that those within the Muslim world or those intellectuals who advocate a two-state should always have this in their mind. But what I'm trying to say is that the dominant actors, first and foremost, the United States, as well as the European actors, and of course Israel itself, because they are mostly, playing into the tune of the Israelis, that they don't have a notion of justice. They do not really try to apply even international law properly. I mean, forget about the colonial nature of the state, forget about, immigration issues, forget about, crimes, economic exploitation, and so forth. Even from the perspective of international law, those who advocate two-state solution, dominant actors, and of course the Chinese or the Indians or the Russians are not very different from them in their approach. It has become a kind of mantra really, to sweep the problem under the carpet. Two-state solution is not meant to establish really two states in which the Palestinians will be at peace, and they will be really sovereign. Therefore, I think this formulation, the two-state formulation, is something that has to be seen as anachronistic. It doesn't really provide any solution today. And we have seen this in the Oslo process. You asked me the question, when did this process start? To the idea of establishing two-state. In 1988, as you well know, the Palestinians issued a declaration saying that that they have established a Palestinian state, and that then they gradually recognized the existence of the state of Israel. And the 1990s witnessed the Oslo process, which came to a dead end in 2000, because the Israelis did not really observe their obligations, and they had no intention really to allow the establishment, the formation of a viable state, Palestinian state, and even the illegal settlements will continued unabated, even increased their pace. So therefore, those who intentionally, though insistent to speak about the two-state solution are, I think, seeking for a palliative solution that really legalizes all the illegal gains made by the Israelis, all the territorial expansions, all those criminal policies, and the so-called security wall, the wall of shame, as well as its aggression against the Palestinians, its colonialism, its racism, its expansionism, its human rights violations. I mean, they never talk about, for instance, these people who advocate the two-state solution. They don't really talk about, sending the Israeli officials into international courts, for instance. They do not really talk about the return of refugees. There are roughly 7 million Palestinian refugees. What will happen to them? The case of the fact that Israel is an apartheid state at the same time. They don't want to talk about that. Israel is a state that violates international law to such an extent that it continuously commits war crimes and crimes against humanity. So they are ready to forget all these things. Therefore, I think that the narrative discourse about the two-state solution is something that is intended really to allow Israel against to be consolidated and to actually really to find a non-solution to the Palestinian problem, which is to have an unsustainable, fragmented state which is under the control of the Israeli state.
Thank you very much, Professor Berdal. From what I have understood from your response to the question is that there's a great indifference and of the Israeli authorities vis-a-vis the Palestinian demands, the international human rights, and what it requires Israel to do. So here, I think we can move on to our next speaker, Professor Yücel. Professor Yücel, Professor Berdal has mentioned the way Israel has responded to criticisms against itself, how it has been so indifferent towards the demands of international society as well as the Palestinians. So I'm really curious about how Israel has responded to the indictment opened against itself at the International Criminal Court. I mean, what are Israel's main arguments for and against the ambits of the ICC's jurisdiction and accusations directed against itself?
Actually, as I explained in the first part, International Criminal Court started a criminal investigation over the acts in the Palestinian territory. Let me describe the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court first. International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over the territories of party states. This is the first, justification for jurisdiction. And the second justification is that the court has also jurisdiction over all acts committed whoever in the territory of a party state. Since the Palestine is a party state to the International Criminal Court, actually it has a jurisdiction as it is accepted by the prosecutor and the pretrial chamber. Despite these, legal identifications over the criminal jurisdiction of International Court over the Palestinian territory, still the first reaction of Israel was that Israel argued that International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over the situation in Palestine. Actually, Israel has given a couple of reasons for this. The first one is that, United Nations General Assembly approved the acceptance of Palestine as a non-full member, as an observer state to the United Nations General Assembly. So it was in 2012. Israel argues that that decision does not endorse that Palestine is a state. That's the first reason or justification for Israeli refusal of International Criminal Court jurisdiction, and just simply saying that Palestine is not a state. That's the first reason. The second reason is as Berdal Acer described about the Oslo Agreement, and Israel refers to the Oslo Agreement in the sense that since the Oslo Agreement describes the borders or the determination of borders as a disputed matter, and Israel simply says that since it is a disputed matter, the borders are disputed matter, then the court cannot have a jurisdiction over a territory which is not described yet by both sides, by Palestine and Israel. That's the second reason for the refusal of International Criminal Court jurisdiction. And the third one is that, actually, the court and the Palestine refers to the occupied territories of Palestine when they speak about the territorial jurisdiction, by saying that the territorial jurisdiction of the court also covers the occupied territory. And Israel says that it's not a legal concept, the term occupied Palestinian territory. This concept is not a legal one according to Israel, it's a political one. That's why the court cannot have jurisdiction over a political term rather than a legal term. That's another reason. And finally, Israel says that Palestine cannot delegate a jurisdiction to the International Criminal Court because Palestine itself does not have a jurisdiction over the occupied territories. According to Israel, since Palestine is not able to, conduct actual jurisdiction or control in the occupied territories, then it cannot delegate, which it does not have. So that's the final reason for Israel to refuse International Criminal Court jurisdiction over the acts in the Palestinian territories.
Thank you very much, Professor Yücel. Now, speaking of the International Criminal Court's decision regarding the atrocities perpetrated by Israel, we can go back to Al-Quds and discuss its special place when it comes to the status quo that has been established in Al-Quds. And we have seen throughout the recent attacks on several holy places in Al-Quds, we have seen that Israel has not really been respecting this status quo in Al-Quds. So I would like to ask you a question regarding this point. Why Israel and its ardent supporter, the United States, want to change the status quo over al-Aqsa Mosque? What is its significance when we take the issue within the context of international law?
Okay, thank you very much. What's important here is that since 1967 and the occupation of Eastern Jerusalem by the Zionist state, Israel has been trying to change the status quo in not just al-Aqsa Mosque, but across many parts, or particularly holy sites within the city. The idea of the status quo actually was developed during the Ottoman period in order to keep the peace between the different Christian groups. And talking about the status quo, keeping the situation as it is, Israel has not really kept the status quo and has been changing gradually the status quo over al-Aqsa Mosque. The first day Israel entered al-Aqsa Mosque, Israel raised the Israeli flag over al-Aqsa. The chief rabbi of the Israeli army suggested blowing up the Dome of the Rock and al-Aqsa Mosque and completely destroying it, because this will be one in a million chance of destroying al-Aqsa in the heat of the war. However, the general said this would be madness and this would cause a massive reaction against this state. So this was diverted and left for some time. However, the first day they occupied the city, they took part of al-Aqsa Mosque, and now from 1967 till this day, Al-Buraq wall, the western wall of Al-Aqsa, is in the hands of the Zionists. Not only that, the whole Maghariba quarter right in front of Al-Aqsa Mosque in the western side was completely destroyed, with all its houses, with all its madrasas, with all its buildings completely destroyed and turned into what they call the Western Wall Plaza or the Wailing Wall Plaza over the Maghariba North African neighborhood. Inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, Israel set up a police station. Inside the mosque, there is an Israeli police station, and Israeli police and the Israeli army comes in on a daily basis to Al-Aqsa Mosque. They also took the gates, the keys to the gates, the gate of the Maghariba. The Maghariba gate, the key of it is in the hands of the Israelis, and that's where the tourists and the Jewish fanatics enter from. So you can see that there has been a gradual change. What we have reached today is the idea of a radical change to the status quo that is in Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this is gathered in particularly 3 points that they would like to reach. The first is to get rid of the Jordanian administration. The Jordanian administration inside the Awqaf, which controls Al-Aqsa Mosque from the inside. It's not allowed to, even from the inside, Israel does not allow any renovation without getting Israel's position in this issue. So the idea is to change it into, to transfer this to Israeli sovereignty fully, and to get rid of the Jordanian custodianship over it. To end the ban on non-Muslim prayer, particularly Jewish prayer, inside the mosque, and to start allowing Jews to pray within the mosque. And this we have seen recently happening in even the Israeli court, talking about allowing silent prayer within the mosque. And the third is for Israel to divide the mosque. Currently, the mosque is divided by time. The morning, from 7 o'clock until the Dhuhr prayer, Jews enter the site, and now they are starting to commence their prayers. The next part is to divide the mosque in terms of space, where they will be allowed to do this. So now, looking at this within, you asked about international law. Actually, during the British occupation, there was the Buraq revolt. And the British sent a team to investigate what had happened. And the report was accepted by the League of Nations that Al-Buraq wall is not a Jewish site. Al-Buraq wall is solely a Muslim site. And the plaza in front of it, the pathway in front of it, and the whole neighborhood is an Islamic waqf. So within that context, the wall of Al-Aqsa Mosque and everything in front of it is an Islamic waqf, and it was taken blatantly by Israel in 1967. Now, coming to Al-Aqsa Mosque, Israel has no right within the area of Al-Aqsa Mosque. This has been a mosque, not just from the time, we can talk about it from an archaeological, architectural, even before the arrival of Umar ibn Khattab. This was a mosque according to Islam, a place of worship right from the beginning of humanity, as a second mosque built on earth from a religious point of view. Coming to the main part of your question, why Israel and the United States are pushing to change the status quo. Actually, in 1967, what we see is that Jewish Zionism and Christian Zionism would like to change the situation on the ground inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. What they would like to see is that Al-Aqsa, over the site of Al-Aqsa, a Jewish temple is built. And Christian Zionists, particularly in the United States, after the occupation in 1967, talked about a prophecy that within a few years, Al-Aqsa will be destroyed and the Jewish temple will be built. And in 1969, we saw that a Christian Zionist came inside Al-Aqsa Mosque with the help of Jewish Zionists and tried to burn Al-Aqsa Mosque and to destroy it. From there, what we saw with the deal of the century, and particularly Donald Trump and evangelical Christians, and with this final point, I'll try to wrap up this point. What they're trying to do is to push this based on the idea that in order for Jesus Christ to return, this is from a Christian Zionist perspective, in order for Jesus Christ to return, a temple, a Jewish temple, needs to be built on the site of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So there is very strong inference from this direction. For Jewish Zionists, actually, they are waiting for this to happen through a miracle from God. This is even the rabbis, the chief rabbinate of Israel, say it is forbidden for Jews to enter Al-Aqsa Mosque until the temple is built. But we have reformist Jews who are saying, we are the ones that will build the temple, and they are pushing this within the Israeli Knesset. They are pushing it to have this division within this place, in forcing the hand of God for Armageddon and the coming of Christ. So there is lots of religious baggage behind both Jewish and Christian thought on this, and this is why both Israel and the United States are pushing this forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid. It makes perfect sense. I mean, in the sense that the Israeli attacks on Al-Quds and Masjid al-Aqsa in particular are not one of those ordinary attacks on Palestinians. These are attempted at certain aims that have historic and even mythological connections to do with Zionism and Zionist projects. But I would like to talk a little bit about the feelings that have been provoked by the attacks of Israel on Al-Quds. So I'd like to get back to Professor Aral and ask him a question regarding the Muslim feelings about the Palestinian issue. Dr. Khalid has just mentioned why Israel and its ardent supporter, United States, have been trying to change the status quo in Al-Quds. But I'm very curious about your take on the issue of the Muslim feelings regarding the Palestinian problem. I mean, how do Muslim societies feel about Palestine? And how should the Muslim world, in your opinion, handle this problem? Is there a unified or a strategical, an institutional strategy that you can observe among Muslim nations? Or has Israel been left on its own vis-a-vis the attacks from Israel?
Thank you, dear Ibrahim. This is a very significant issue, of course. I mean, Palestinians are mostly Muslims. Of course, there are Christians as well among them, but the majority of Palestinians, they are Muslims. And we should not forget that Palestine is at the very heart of the Muslim world. First, within the Arab world, within the West Asia or Middle East, it is at the heart of the geographical area. But it's also at the heart of the Muslim world as well. When you look at the map, that really indicates the continuous geographical location of Muslim societies, within which, at the core, you could find that there is among the territories Palestine. Therefore, there is no way in which, of course, the Muslims could remain indifferent to the problem. By Muslims, I mean, of course, the people. I don't refer to at this moment to the governments. Of course, we expect Muslim states, Muslim governments to really to care about the plight of the Palestinians. But at the moment, the degree of interest seems to be quite minimal, unfortunately. So apart from also the geographical location, we should not forget that Qudus, Al-Quds is a holy place for Muslims, as Dr. Awaisi has mentioned. Masjid al-Aqsa is there. It was the first qibla of the Muslims, and there are lots of crucial sites in the area for Muslims, mosques and other, and cemeteries and so forth. So the area is also crucial for Muslims. Apart from that, the former sovereign of the area was the Ottoman Empire, and before the Ottoman Empire, the area was governed by other Islamic states. So there is this unbreakable chain of continuous Muslim rule in the area, and the people are indigenous to the area. The people are indigenous to the area, as opposed to the Jews who are not indigenous to the area. They have been implanted to the area by the colonial occupiers, as well as after this establishment of the Zionist state. So these are issues that we have to bear in mind. And I think we should also mention the fact that colonial experience is not something unique to the Palestinians, unfortunately. Before the colonial age ended, I mean, most of the Muslim territories had been colonized by the same kind of colonial forces that really created the problem. Either the French colonialism, the British colonialism, Dutch colonialism, and other forms of colonialism. So there is this commonality of historical victimhood as far as Muslims are concerned. This is not simply a matter for the Palestinians. Apart from Turkey or the Ottoman Empire, and Iran, Persia, and partly Afghanistan, all of the Muslim territories had become colonized in the early 20th century. So I mean, it is not something that is of course the colonialism within Palestine is something new, because it has happened in an age when colonialism was actually coming to an end. But in terms of sympathizing with the Palestinians, apart from the religious sentiment, of course, it's very, very powerful. But apart from that, there is this commonality of historical sufferings that will surround both peoples, Muslims generally, and the Palestinians themselves. Apart from that, there's also existing suffering within the Muslim world. Muslim world is this victim of neo-colonial enterprises, military interventions, occupations. Don't forget, in 2001, Afghanistan was invaded by the US and the British. In 2003, Iraq was invaded. These are very crucial sites of Muslim civilization. And there's hardly any place where there is no intervention from outside by the neo-colonial forces, imperialistic, hegemonic states, first and foremost, of course, the United States. So, I mean, the commonality, the common sentiments and sense of desperation about the existing hegemonic international system does not only actually, penetrate into the souls of the Palestinians, it also penetrates into the hearts of the Muslims in the world. So, of course, in a way, in this sense, we could say that today, actually, to a limited extent, the whole Muslim world has been Palestinized. It has been Palestinized by the hegemonic system, and of course, the United States, as well as its courts from Europe and some other states as well. So there is this strong common bond of suffering between Muslims and the Palestinians as well. Therefore, no doubt that Palestine is the most crucial, the paradigmatic case of injustice as far as the Muslims are concerned. So therefore, without solving this problem, there is no way in which we could talk about the decolonization of the Muslim world. Therefore, Palestine is definitely more than Palestine. Palestinian problem is more than the Palestinian problem. We should not forget that.
Thank you very much, Professor Berdal. I personally find it very perplexing when it comes to a nation demanding its independence, because when the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, several people, various people were motivated to demand their independence from the Ottoman Empire. But when it comes to Palestine, we are witnessing the fact that Palestinian people are denied of their right to self-determination and other rights that are sort of default rights for most people. So this takes me to another question that I would like to ask to Professor Yücel. You have mentioned that Israel has responded to the ICC's indictment by saying that Palestine is not cannot be a party to this indictment because of the problems of its statehood. So I'm curious, I'm very curious about how the ICC, the chamber, has responded to the question of Palestine's statehood.
Yes, actually, this is a very significant question in terms of the statehood of Palestine as well. But there are also many significant reflections of the decision of the chamber. Before looking at the chamber's decision and its reflections, I think it is useful to start with the prosecution's findings. In order to decide for a prosecutor to initiate a criminal investigation over an application, then there are certain criteria that are coming from the statute of the International Criminal Court should be met. The prosecutor said that all the criteria over the application of Palestine have been met. The first criteria is that in order for a prosecutor to start an investigation, there should be, substantial evidences that the alleged crimes are committed in that case. And the prosecutor decided there are, sufficient information that certain crimes have been committed in the territory of Palestine, and especially referred to the Israeli Defense Forces, and said that actually the war crimes have been committed by the Israeli security forces, especially in the West Bank and East Qudus, and also in Gaza Strip. These are the occupied territories. So that's a quite significant finding by the prosecutor, that these crimes are actually committed. And the prosecutor also said that these are only the limited examples, and she said that she believes that there would be more, evidences to show that there are more crimes committed than the findings in that stage. That's a significant finding, actually. The second one is that she also identified that Israel is not willing to prosecute those responsible for these crimes. So that's why the court says that the prosecutor says that she has to do a criminal investigation, because Israel, as an occupied force, is not willing to prosecute these people. Another finding is that Palestine is a perfectly state party to the Statute of International Criminal Court, because Palestine has been accepted as a state party to the statute by all members. So there was only Canada actually, complaining about the application and at that stage, but all other states did not raise any objection when Palestine applied to be a party state to the Statute of International Criminal Court. That has been also, identified by the prosecutor. And over these findings, the chamber actually did more on this question of application. And firstly, the chamber requested submissions from Palestine, from Israel, from all other related states, also from international organizations, and also from a chamber representing the victims as well. So there have been enormous information coming to the chamber over this matter of jurisdiction of the court in the Palestinian territory. And actually the chamber simply, first of all, decided that it has no jurisdiction to discuss the status of Palestine as a state. That's a different matter, which is out of the chamber's jurisdiction. But the chamber concluded that Palestine is a state party to the ICC statute because it has been accepted as such. And also, the chamber referred to many decisions taken by international organizations, including the United Nations, International Court of Justice, and some other international organizations, referring to the right to self-determination of the people of Palestine. And the chamber has taken these decisions, referring to the self-determination right of the Palestinian people, as enough evidence that, although the territorial boundaries have not been certainly decided, still Palestine has a jurisdiction, has an authority over these territories, because it has a right to self-determination. It all covers all the Palestinian territory. That's why the court said that Palestine is a perfect state in terms of being a party to the International Criminal Court status, and also the boundaries of Palestine are perfectly eligible for a jurisdiction, because it has a right to self-defense over that. And also, let me add this point as well. The chamber also, commented over the Oslo Accords, which describes the boundaries as a dispute. And the court said that the chamber said that this does not prevent Palestine from becoming a party state to international organizations or international agreements. So whenever Palestine becomes a party to the international organization, including the International Court of Justice, that means it has a jurisdiction to accept the authority of these international organizations, including the international courts. That's why the chamber did not, regard Oslo agreements as something preventing the jurisdiction of International Criminal Court.
Thank you very much, Professor Yücel. Well, it looks like the ICC's decisions will continue to give goosebumps to Israel, and it will raise a lot of dust in the close future, and we will be following this matter closely. And let me get back to Professor Berdal. And now we're going to, I'm sorry, I skipped Professor, apologies. Apologies, Dr. Khalid.
Not a problem at all. I always love to listen to Professor Berdal.
Because my question is related to his previous comments. So following on Berdal Aral, I'd like to ask you a third question regarding the Muslim feelings and thoughts about the Palestinian issue. Now that many Arab states are in good cooperation with the United States and even with Israel recently, the Gulf countries I'm talking about, Muslim people, especially people who do not share the same race with Palestinians, are surprised when they see that some Arab states support the Trump plan on al-Quds. So what's your take on this issue? Why do some Arab states support the Trump's plan on al-Quds?
Okay, let me be very frank on this issue. Actually, most of the Arab states are not fully sovereign states. Professor Berdal talked about colonialism. Before the colonialists left the Muslim region, West Asia and North Africa, they left people who will serve, like Israel is serving Western interests. They left in these countries that they created. Most of these countries were created by the British and the French, and these countries never existed. A country like Jordan, with its borders being drawn with a ruler, and identities were being created, and puppets were placed in these states to rule and to give them a sense of nationhood and nationality by lines being drawn in the sand. What is interesting is that relationship between the Zionists and these Arab I don't know what to call them, regimes, is not a new thing. Most of this used to happen under the table. And with time going on, we see that there has been very strong relations under the table happening for many decades. What has changed with Donald Trump, and I think he exposed all these rulers, he made it very clear, and that was probably the first time the American policy hasn't really changed on this issue. But with Donald Trump in power as a businessman, he wanted to show what he's achieving. And he made it so clear that with one call to King Salman of Saudi Arabia, he told him, you have to pay. And he paid. He told him, within 2 weeks, if we lift our protection over you, you will fall. Then he reduced it to 2 days and then to 2 hours. The Arab Spring showed how fragile these Arab states are. And without Western support, they cannot stand on their feet whatsoever. They always have to have a third foot keeping them in place. So these Arab states are not the people. And this is the difference. We saw Palestine in all the squares across from Cairo to Tunisia during the Arab Spring, and we saw how the Arab Spring was diverted towards this. Now we come to a stage where Israel is actually under threat, and this is based on future studies of Israeli academics, that Israel does not have the same bond that it had in 1948. What gathered the Jews in 1948 around this idea of a Jewish state no longer exists today. So this threat, in order to looking at lessons from history and looking at other things, normalization, open normalization with these states is needed. So what we see is that Donald Trump was actually forcing some of these states to openly. They have a secret relationship with Israel, like the United Arab Emirates for quite some time, and Bahrain, and even Morocco for many decades. What Donald Trump succeeded, and his son-in-law Jared Kushner succeeded in doing, is taking this secret relationship to the public, coming out to the public and letting them know that actually we need to have good relationship with Israel and making Israel a normal state. We saw this with Morocco, telling them about the Western Sahara. If you do this, then we will do this for you. We will recognize your sovereignty over the Western Sahara. Morocco came in and accepted. Sudan, we will take your name off the terrorist list, and they came in. With the Gulf states, it's a different scenario. Mohammed bin Salman wants to be recognized. He had the soft coup against his within the palace, and he wants Western recognition. And the shortest cut to get Western support is through supporting its outpost in the region, which is the State of Israel. So these Arab countries or Arab states are not actually doing it out of what their people want. They're actually doing it to stay in their seats that they are sitting over, and without Western support, they will not be able to stay where they are. These fabricated states that have been created by Western colonialism will not be able to survive without Western support. They don't have even their own people's support. They've tried for many decades to try to create a sense of nationhood, a sense of identity. But what we are seeing, the future second wave of an Arab Spring would actually change this. And to finally put this where the other speakers have mentioned, this is not a Palestinian issue. This is not an Arab issue. This is not even a Muslim issue. This is an issue for humanity. Anyone with a decent heart, seeing what Israel is doing, cannot accept. What adds to this dimension, this is extremely important for Muslims. This is their first Qibla. It's number one, and it's the second mosque on earth, and it's one of 3 mosques holy to Muslims. So it's not something that the Muslims will sign over even if all the Muslim leaders sign it over to Donald Trump, the people will not accept this. This is part of their creed, part of their aqidah. They shall never give this up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid, for this very concise response. And I would like to thank you for making a clear distinction between Arab people's response to what's going on and the Arab states' complacency with the Israeli policies. And with this response, we'll come to our final round of questions. And this time, hopefully, I'm not giving you a wrong alert, Professor Berdal, and apologies for the wrong alert I've just given. As Dr. Khalid has also mentioned, this issue is not limited with the Muslim world or the Christian world. It's a problem for all humanity. And as you have rightly put it in your article, which was published in our fall 2021 issue, you have concluded your commentary by saying that if Palestine ever dies, this would be the death of humanity. And this is really, this has really bigger connotations than just an academic, proposition. So I would like to ask you about the right solution that you have put in your title. What is the right solution that you can come up with the current problem and the developments in Palestine and beyond?
Thank you. Before going further regarding your question, I would like to follow from what Dr. Khalid said about the minority regimes within the Arab world. I think the minority regimes, for minority regimes, the other is the people themselves, is their own people, it's the other. It's not the bullies, it's not the imperialistic hegemony, it's not injustice, it's not the enemies of the Muslim or Arab world, it is their own people. I think that's why it's very important that we have in the Muslim world a true representation of people. It's very, very political rights and the right of people to decide about their own future. It's very, very important, not only for its own sake, but it's also a matter for an honorable perspective of the international society, a very righteous position with regard to injustice in the world. Of course, it's a matter for the whole world, as Dr. Khalid said, and you have said, Ibrahim Bey, because this is the epitome of injustice. I mean, there's no other clear case of injustice. It has lasted for 100 years. The degree of tyranny, oppression, colonialism, human rights crimes, war crimes, persecution, imprisonment, torture, it's so widespread that it has become routine. And I will also argue that a very large part of humanity has become Palestinized. I think the international system is so wild, it's so barbarous, it's so unremitting that it has turned a very significant portion of the international system and the geography in the non-Western world into semi-colonies, basically. So we have to understand that the Palestine is us. Palestine is us. We have to understand that. With regard to the solution of the problem, I think that there's no other strategy than the strategy of resistance. I mean, the Palestinians have been resisting for 100 years. We should not forget that. They are resisting for 100 years. And I believe that they are continuing the resistance. And hopefully, as a Muslim and as a supporter of the Palestinian case, I hope that Hamas and the PLO will unite as soon as possible so that they can establish a united front against aggression and colonialism. And they should, forget about the divisions and the differences of strategies. I think that after Oslo, I believe that the very significant bulk of the Palestinian society has come to accept that there's no way to solve the problem by negotiation or by expecting that the United States is going to act as intermediary between the parties and will solve the problem. It is not going to solve the problem. Europeans are not going to solve the problem. The Chinese, the Russians, and the Indians, they really are not interested in the problem at all. So the problem is a Muslim problem in that sense, in terms of solution. All right, in terms of solution, the problem is in the hands of the Muslims, and we should not forget that. I suggest that apart from the strategy of the resistance by the Palestinians themselves, I think the Islamic Cooperation Organization, as well as the United Nations, should impose sanctions, complete sanctions against Israel, the Zionist state, complete military, economic, financial, social, political sanctions against the Zionist state. But the Muslim world should actually, take action by adopting a robust decision that is going to observe by certain mechanisms that all of the Muslim states should apply sanctions, complete sanctions against the state of Israel. And then they could have the guts and the cause, the right cause to say to others in the United Nations General Assembly, let's support us. Let's adopt another resolution in the United Nations General Assembly. Why do I not mention the Security Council? As you well know, the reason is because there is no way that the Security Council is going to accept such a motion against the Zionist state, because the United States will veto the draft resolution. That's why there is an alternative mechanism which was established in 1950. That is called Uniting for Peace Resolution. Uniting for Peace Resolution. In case that there is a breach of international peace and security, when a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council is blocking the adoption of a decision, then the majority of the council members without veto threat can submit the case to the United Nations General Assembly. And then the United Nations General Assembly can meet within 24 hours to discuss the problem. The General Assembly, by 2/3 majority, could advise, but this advice, not binding, but this advice, can advise the adoption all sorts of actions, including the use of force against aggressive states. And this has been used many times, including during the Korea War by the United States in the General Assembly, during the Congo crisis in 1960, 1956, during the Suez crisis. It has been used. This is not something that is imaginary. So I think this is also something that should be part of the international struggle against the Zionist state. And I also suggest that the Palestinians should be given all sorts of support from outside, by Arab states as well as other Muslim states, and maybe other states which are not Muslim majority, because this is a universal cause. They could provide economic assistance, political assistance, as well as military assistance. We should not forget that Palestine is a state today. It's a state, but it's a state under military occupation. And Dr. Khalid, as well as Professor Yücel Acer, they have mentioned that Palestine has been accepted as a state internationally. It has been accepted as a state in the United Nations. About 140 states recognize Israel as a state. And they have a right of self-defense against aggression, against armed attack. Okay, and the Israelis, they have been launched attacks against Gaza, as you well know. Periodically, this is definitely tantamount to an armed attack, which means that Palestinians have a right of self-defense as a state under occupation. This also suggests that other states can provide assistance, military assistance. They have a right of collective self-defense as well. So in case that the state of Palestine signs treaty with other states regarding collective self-defense against armed attack, then this is also legal under international law. In case that anyone could argue, for example, Americans could argue, they would say Palestine is not a state. Even if one assumes that Palestine is not a state, but since it has been acknowledged to have the right of self-determination under existing international law, a people fighting against foreign occupation, they have a right of self-determination, and they are entitled to receive assistance from outside. This is mentioned in the Declaration on Friendly Relations, 1970, by the United Nations General Assembly, 1970. This is also implied in the Geneva Conventions, the first protocol, edited protocol in 1977. So they have the right to receive assistance from outside in their struggle against military occupation. So, of course, I do not suggest in any way that the solution only lies in international law. Of course, international law could be utilized effectively against the Zionist state, of course. But we should also understand that struggle should also be pursued through other means by actually launching really a campaign among not only Muslim states, hopefully among the members of non-aligned group of states, the African Union, all right? Even perhaps to some extent, they could also mobilize the civil societies in Europe as well, because there are lots of people who detest the Zionist operation, its apartheid policies, its discrimination, its racism, oppression, occupation. They are fed up with this. Something has to be done, and I think this strategy is a manifold strategy which tries to employ all sorts of avenues for an effective solution. Thank you.
Professor Berdal Aral, thank you for unfolding this right strategy in your own words. And I find it very realistic and motivating in the sense that it invites all Muslim countries to stand together and act together. And also it directs criticism against the international system regarding its liturgy when it comes to Palestine. And I think a final proposition, which involves further support for Palestine in its fight against or in its self-defense against the attacks. They're all realistic and very motivating, and I'm sure they have all been heard and welcomed by many like me. So with this response, I'd like to ask a final question to Professor Yücel Acer. Professor, you have talked about the process of the ICC court's decision to investigate the crimes perpetrated against Palestinians and its decision to accept Palestinian statehood. And I find all these developments as positive, but also I'm also a bit hesitant to be too optimistic. So I want to learn your take on this issue. What are the real ramifications of the ICC trial process? Will it be able to make a real difference? And do you think there are some challenges? And what are the requirements for the success of these trials?
True to say that what I have said so far are all quite positive and promising. First of all, we have come to a point that justice can be delivered to the victims of crimes committed by Israel, especially in the occupied territories. That's the first, reflection, quite positive reflection. The second one is that about the statehood of Palestine. Although prosecutor and chamber did not really address the issue of the status of Palestine as a state, both of them said that, Palestine went through all the necessary procedures to become a state party to the ICC statute. There were almost no objections from the party states arguing that Palestine was not a state, so it could not become a party to the ICC statute. That's another significant, point. Another significant point is that, the chamber and the prosecutor identified specifically certain crimes, especially in the occupied territories, since 2014. That year actually was the start of the jurisdiction. Even since 2014, they identified certain crimes like war crimes and crimes of certain nature committed by Israeli armed forces and authorities. That's another significant identification. But still, it's quite too early to say that we should be so positive about the future developments. That's because it all requires the support from international community to conduct a proper trials, first of all, because the court is not able to, try people in absentia. So that means all the accused people should be brought before the court. That's the first point. The second point is that all the alleged crimes are committed in the territory of Palestine, especially the occupied territories. How the court would be able to conduct investigations, criminal investigations in the place where Israeli forces are actually acting at the moment. You know, it would be quite difficult for the court to go to the scene of the crimes, you know, to try to collect the evidences in first hand. That would be quite difficult because all these territories, especially West Bank, East Kudus, and the other occupied parts, all are under the control of Israel at the moment. That's another point. Another significant issue is that even if court decides and find some officials as criminals or accused and convicted people, then how it's going to apply the sanctions to these people? These are another problem. I think for all these, we should see that the states, not Israel probably, but all other states should help the court to do these trials, and it's going to be a success. Otherwise, if there is no proper and necessary support from international community, then the trials would continue, but unfortunately it would stay in the stage of criminal investigation rather than a trials. If the people's, considering that most of them are going to be officials of Israel and military and civil officials of Israel, then it would be quite difficult to continue trials. Last point is that the court, the prosecutor and chamber talks not only about the Israeli acts, it also talks about the acts of Hamas and some other armed groups. Unfortunately, I am a bit uneasy about the fact that it could become the trials of the members of Hamas and other armed Palestinian groups rather than the Israeli officials, because it would be quite difficult to bring these Israeli officials before the court.
Well, this is interesting. I mean, despite the challenges, I still find the idea of Israel being, tried in an international court very promising, to be honest. But I also acknowledge the challenges, the problems that you have just mentioned. I think the whole international community and states in particular should take more courageous steps to support the international court so that it can further its investigation into Israel. And with this, I would like to advise our readers to read Professor Yücel Acer's article that was published in our fall issue of 2021. It will give you a more thorough perspective of the international law aspect of the situation. So thank you very much, Professor Yücel. Now, I will ask my final question to Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid, when we talk about the developments in Palestine and in Israel, there's always a missing link, which is the Israeli society. And it's a very, a close society. We don't hear much about the Israeli society. We don't know much about how the Israeli society feels about the Zionist policies, for example. So in your article that was published in our 2020 summer issue, there's a section on the changes in Israeli society over al-Aqsa. So could you please elaborate on this issue? How do Israeli people feel about Israel's policies regarding Al-Quds and Masjid al-Aqsa in particular?
Thank you. It's an important question, and Israeli society is divided over many issues. But one thing that they are united around is the idea of this Jewish temple, which is quite sad. I was in, many people try to sometimes put some hope that Israeli society actually will wake up and stand against the aggression that its state is doing. And what we see actually, whenever there is an election, before the last election, there is always an aggression against Lebanon or against Gaza, or aggression. This changes the tides in terms of uniting the Israelis around a common enemy. Now, what we are seeing, the changes regarding Al-Aqsa Mosque, is that from the mainstream left all the way to the religious right, everyone within the Israeli state is asking for sovereignty, full Israeli sovereignty over Al-Aqsa Mosque, with the exception of the progressive left, which is relatively small. The idea that, although in terms of history and archaeology, there never existed this idea of a temple, archaeologists and even Israeli archaeologists say that there is no remains whatsoever of the first temple. They've been doing all this investigation since 1967. It doesn't exist. However, within the Jewish psyche, the area of Al-Aqsa Mosque is the area of an ex-Jewish temple. And however, they are divided over how this temple should be built. I mentioned the chief rabbinate of Israel say it is forbidden for Jews, and it's written over the Magharibi Gate, it is forbidden for Jews, according to the Torah, to enter the area of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Not because of its importance to Muslims, but because you cannot enter it until you are cleansed and until there are certain rituals. And if you enter it, then you are sinful. However, what has happened in recent years is many Jewish rabbis have revoked this fatwa or this decree, and they are saying, no, we should be the ones that are driving the rebuilding of the third temple. And what they have done is they have a number of the Temple Mount Faithful, the Temple Institute, and various different organizations, all calling for, even they have prepared not a model of this temple, they prepared the clothes that these rabbis will be wearing. They've even prepared the qurbans, the sacrifices that they will be making. They have training for the rabbis within the area. Their plan is to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuild or build a Jewish temple over it, to correct myself, to build a Jewish temple over it. However, one group, which is the majority, are saying this temple will come down from the heaven. It will come down with the Messiah. We should not do anything. And those who try to push the hand of God shall be punished. However, now we have a group, and now more dangerous than this group is Christian Zionists, who are also pushing this forward and actually attempted to destroy Al-Aqsa at numerous times. This idea of the temple is unfortunately ingrained within the Jewish psyche, within Israeli society, and it is something that they are waiting for to happen. The building of, and I don't know if you've seen, one of the rabbis last week was inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, and behind him he took a picture of the Dome of the Rock, and he said, I am looking for a construction engineer to tear this down and for us to rebuild the temple. This is a Jewish rabbi. What is happening inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, to wrap this up? If this would happen in any other holy place in the world, the whole world would stand up in arms. What we saw in a synagogue in Paris, in France, when the whole world leaders came together because of what happened, the attack on the synagogue. An attack on Al-Aqsa happens on a daily basis. People were killed in their tents inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. People were injured. This is the first Qibla of the Muslims. And I completely agree with Professor Berdal that this is a Muslim issue. They have to deal with it. The world, neither China nor the US nor Russia wants to resolve this issue. They pay lip service towards this. But this is a Muslim issue, and it needs to be solved by Muslims, not Arabs, because Arabs constitute a small number of the Muslims. This is a Muslim issue for Muslims from Indonesia all the way to North America. This is an issue that needs to be resolved, and we need to find a solution for this problem before we lose Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then it will be too late. This is something I really fear, that we wake up and Israel has succeeded in the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then demonstrations nor voices and crying will do us anything if we have, unfortunately, seeing this scenario that, unfortunately, Israel is working towards.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid. Now that we have exceeded our time limit, the time limit allocated for our panel has exceeded, so I will close the panel here with the permission of our speakers, of course, if they have nothing else to add up. I would like to thank them for their insights into the issue and also their elaboration on the papers they have with which they have contributed to our previous issues. And as a personal remark, I know that this is a very small drop in the ocean. What we have tried to do is a very humble attempt to contribute to the final cause of awakening everyone, every person, and especially Muslims, to the danger that is approaching. And hopefully it will give enough alert to raise them up against atrocities, attacks, and crimes against humanity and Palestinians. And I accept that the issue is intertwined with history, historical matters, Zionism, and of course international law. And perhaps we could spare another session, another special issue on this issue, or a panel. So I'd like to thank you all, and I hope to see you again in another event of Inside Turkey. And please keep following us. Thank you very much. Have a good night.